Hi, good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, also live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. As always, we entreat you to share the link to groups and platforms you might be on so family members, loved ones can join the conversation and share their thoughts with us on the issues we discuss. And tonight, we're dealing with a very important subject matter when it comes to the governance of our nation. How state-owned enterprises are performing in our nation. If you can remember, just a few months ago, the Auditor General's report was out there and the generality of the Ghanaian media were chewing on it. His Excellency the President tasked a very important institution, SIGA, the State Interests and Governance Authority, to collaborate with the Auditor General's office to ensure that these infractions and issues therein were dealt with. And so tonight, we happen to be coming to you live from the office of the Director of SIGA. And what are we talking about? We are talking about what they've done so far, their successes, their challenges, and how we can move our state-owned enterprises forward. My name is Samuel Eshen, and it's a privilege to welcome you to the conversation. We'll go for a short commercial break. When we come back, I'll introduce my guest to you. Do stay with us. And welcome back to Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1, also live on Facebook. My guest tonight is Ambassador Edward Boateng. Good evening, sir.
Welcome to SIGA, and it's a privilege to have you with us.
It's a beautiful
today.
place, very beautiful place you have, sir.
Thank you. Actually, when I came, I set this up myself. So, based
really?
on my experience, I felt that the Director General of SIGA needed to present a certain image because we are responsible for all the state entities and we receive a lot of very important visitors. So everything you see here, we did it ourselves.
So you didn't want a situation where the media would say that for an institution like yours that is supposed to be in charge of these state-owned enterprises, you are spending so much from your coffers, and so you're using your private.
So I use my own private.
You use your private money.
Yeah. And now our next job is to make sure that we beautify our environment and also beautify the building, and we're working on that. That's important because when dignitaries come here, that's the first thing they comment on. But obviously, I work for the governor of Georgia. I work for Coca-Cola. I work for CNN. I had my own company, Global Media Alliance. I was ambassador to China. And I believe that when somebody comes to you, your image is also very important. That's why I went through this effort.
Do you get the sense as state-owned enterprises, they have this appreciation of the significance of your environment when it comes to their business?
Unfortunately, in Ghana, we don't. And that's why sometimes when foreign entities come here, they look down on us. Sometimes you visit even some ministers and you want to use their restroom and it's a sight to behold. But I think it's changing, and I must say that with a lot of the younger ministers we have today, when you go to their offices, they are world-class standards, so it's changing. But I would also like to appeal to a lot of my colleague CEOs that their environment is a reflection of their own being, so they should make sure that when people come there, it doesn't necessarily have to be maybe as beautiful as we've done this place, but it should be something that people walk away with a good image of you.
Your office is a very young one, but with a very huge task. You came to meet institutions, agencies that have been in existence for a long time, and you're supposed to ensure compliance. How has been your work?
SIGA itself is a young entity, but its antecedents date back to our first president when Dr. Nkrumah started the industrialization program. That was when he realized at a point that he needed to have some control over the establishment of these entities and also for the entities to meet their mandate. So he set up the Sex Secretariat, which was in his office. Then after that, after the coup d'etat, I think he went into sort of, I would say, comatose. Then later it was revived by General Kutu Champong. And that was when the President's Sec came into being. Again, it was not resourced properly, and then not much happened, but they did some very good work. But the impact was not felt as much as it should have. Then when Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo came based on his industrialization policy and his vision to see that state entities become the engine of growth also for our private sector. He set up SIGA in 2019. SIGA so far has done very well, if I may say so, because today you realize that more entities are beginning to comply. More entities are presenting their audited accounts. Last week we had a session with the Controller and Accountant General, and for the first time about 62 entities were included in the national accounts. It's never happened. And all through the work that we're doing here at SIGA. Again, entities are signing performance contracts. So entities are very much aware of their KPIs and what they deliver. And we have monitoring teams. Board chairmen are also being trained. Not board chairmen, boards in general are being trained. Before, most of our entities were managed with what I call the kiosk mentality. So even though I'm managing a multi-million-dollar or multi-million CD organization, I run it like my own little kiosk. And that is what we seek to change. We believe that eventually, if we're able to carry out our mandate and achieve a certain level of success, the state entities will provide the economic superhighway, as I term it, for the development of entrepreneurship, for the development of private sector in our country. To give you a very simple example, from our industry, because I'm also from media, I'm one of you. When I went to South Africa to start my business, I never went to set up a mast. I never went to set up a studio because those things were provided for. Even $1 billion company, DSTV, they started from the studios of SABC. When I was in the US with CNN, the state provided, or the federal government provided that infrastructure. And I believe that if we're able to do that in Ghana, then it's going to be easier for the private sector to move faster and also to incur less cost and employ more people. The state industries have not been able to do that efficiently. Sometimes through no fault of theirs, because there was no clarity in terms of their mandate. Because when we set off initially as a country, the responsibility of most state entities was just to provide jobs for people. But I think we're going beyond that now. So for what I have described, I think SIGA is doing well. But we need to do better. And I believe we can do better. My vision, and I'm here for a very, very short time, because normally most people who go into this position stay for 10, 15 years to make an impact. I don't have that luxury of time. My goal is to make SIGA a center of excellence, so that young people coming out of university who want to work in the public sector will see SIGA as the place to go. And I believe that if you look at the sort of resumes and CVs we are getting, and people are beginning to take note. A lot of young people want to come here, and when you finish your interview and you go around, you see the sort of brain power that we're pulling into SIGA. I think if we're able to do that and also train them effectively for them to manage, monitor, and evaluate these entities, we'll see a change down the line.
You kept using the word mandate. What's your core mandate?
Our core mandate is enshrined in the SIGA Act, which was passed on June 2019. And our mandate is to ensure that state entities are profitable, they are productive, and that also they are complying with the, they're meeting their own mandates. So Act 3 makes it very, very clear. We're also responsible for, we're the custodian of all the state interest in these companies. So for SOEs, the government's own 100%, we are responsible for making sure that they meet their mandate in terms of their KPIs. In terms of institutions like other state organizations, the regulatory bodies, to ensure that they are doing what is required of them. And also for our joint venture companies to make sure that government's interests in those institutions are protected. At the end of the day, the totality of this is that all these institutions have to be efficiently and diligently run so that they can pay some dividends to government. Most of these institutions, since they are set up, have never paid any dividend back to government. And it's time that government also begins to get a return on its investment in these institutions.
Would you say you are making progress in terms of your success story? would you say that? I'm asking this question on the back of the recent exercise by the ECG to collect monies from entities that owe them, for which some of these state-owned enterprises showed up, who were nearly disconnected, but as a result of their willingness to make some commitment to the ECG, were not disconnected. Even the ECG itself, who had to sit for a while before now they decided to take this action. Using that alone as an example, have you made progress where state-owned enterprises have to be chased before they pay bills?
I think the current ECG management under Mr. Dubik Mahama is a clear example of what SIGA seeks to achieve. And I would commend him on your program that he's doing a good job. Other state entities like DVLA, Food and Drugs Authority, Ghana Tourism Authority, are also doing similar. They're also doing a good job in their own little ways. Accountability is the key. I think the fact that you are a state-owned enterprise doesn't mean that you don't have to pay your bills. That was the position before, and that was the thinking before. That's what we seek to change, and I think ECG is in front of that. So very soon it won't only be ECG, but other Ghana Water, or I mean, where are people not paying their water bills, or road tolls? I mean, most of the time, even government vehicles don't pay road tolls, and I've always wondered, well, why don't they pay? You just have to mention your institution and they waive you. All those things have to stop, because at the end of the day, in any country, government is the biggest provider of goods and services, and those have to be paid for. So if government is not paying for those goods and services, who has to pay for them? So everybody has to be responsible, and the accountability has started, because we at SIGA, we push. I'm always on the phone with Dubik. We speak almost every other day, and I'm encouraging him that what he's doing is right. And I was very, very happy when the first entity that he disconnected was his own ministry. We at SIGA, we are on prepaid, so we will not have that problem. But all other things, he has to go after everybody. Nobody is sacrosanct. And I think the reason why a lot of our state entities have not performed was principally because of this mindset, Abayan Juma or Abayan there, so people just manage it anyhow, or they don't pay their bills. But that has to stop. And the reason why Ghana Telecom failed was because we're not paying their bills. When Vodafone came, the same people who were not paying the bills were paying. When MTN came, they were paying. And today, MTN has become a multi-billion-dollar organization in Ghana. Why couldn't we have paid the bill for Ghana Telecom to have transitioned into that? You talk about TV license. People are not paying GBC, but they are watching TV. All those things, we have to find ways of stopping it and making sure that there's accountability in the system.
You speak about accountability, and it brings me to one of the key things within your act, the SIGA Act, which has to do with the corporate governance structure and how it has to be beefed up. And so I'm asking myself, if entities know that in preparation of their budgets, even their financial outlook for maybe first quarter, second quarter, or the entire year, they know that they have bills to pay. They know that they have commitments they need to make. If the corporate governance structures are right, these things are no issues that would pop up, would they?
As I told you before, we had the kiosk mentality. When you go to a kiosk, they have everything there, but the owner manages it how she or he deems fit. So that has to change, and that's what we're changing through some of these training programs. The boards have to make sure that they implement their mandate. But to be able to implement your mandate, you need to know what to do. And sometimes, to be honest, people sit on boards and they have no idea. And that's what we're seeking to change. Now, a lot of these people are not paying their bills because there were no sanctions in the past. Each ECG just sat. Or some of these government institutions, they just sat. Or if you wanted to disconnect, you get a phone call from a higher authority. All that is coming to an end. And very soon you realize that a lot of these entities will begin to generate the requisite revenue that would be able to help them to stand on their own. Because we also had the big brother syndrome. You don't have money, you run to Ministry of Finance. You don't have money, you run to your ministry. You don't have money, you just sit and do nothing. Now you just cannot sit and do nothing, because at the end of the year you'll be evaluated, named and shamed. And a lot of people don't want to be named and shamed. So that is a process that has started. It's going to take a while. Some people, like obviously the ECG boss, will run faster than others. But I believe that with time, we'll begin to see that change. And what we are doing now is not rocket science. The United Kingdom went through it during the time of Margaret Thatcher. And they had to sell a lot of state assets, which they believed at that time had outlived their usefulness, to the private sector. France went through that. China went through that. So maybe we were a bit late of the starting blocks, but what we're doing has been done in other countries, and there are a lot of examples for us to learn from.
I remember my first engagement with you via phone on my show in the morning. The excitement, the enthusiasm, and the energy with which you spoke when you have been appointed to head this institution. And then subsequently, reports come from the Auditor General's office, and it's evident that the institutions that you are supposed to have oversight responsibility over in terms of compliance and then corporate governance and all of that are falling behind, and compliance is an issue.
They're not falling behind.
Okay.
They're not falling behind.
Okay.
There is a better, a more robust audit system now.
Okay.
So the torch is being shown on everybody, so you can't hide. So it doesn't mean that they are falling behind. It's just that right now there's more transparency. Okay. So there are more facts out there. But if you look at the Auditor General's report, it's much, much better than we've ever had. And I would encourage media people like yourself to read as well. Take the report and please read it. Just don't look at the headlines. Of the figure that was said, that I think a figure of about 17 point something billion was thrown out. If you look at it, a lot of it is interagency indebtedness to, some of it date back 20 years, 30 years. What we have to do now is to clean the books, because some of these monies will never be paid back, or they cannot be paid back. So we clean the books so that we all have a clearer picture, so that going forward, the accountability matrix can be higher. Because if right now, I'm sitting with 20 million Ghana cedis that have not been sitting on my books, the Auditor General every year will repeat the same number and add to it. That is the challenge that we have, because there was no accountability system for a very, very long time. And because we've now started, a lot of these numbers go back a long way. So the challenge now is to do the cleaning up. That also comes with its own set of problems, because it affects in general the balance sheet of the nation. So it's a whole process that we all have to painstakingly think through and work through methodically, so that as much as we want to clean the books, we don't, especially in the situation in which we find ourselves now, also tilt the balance of our balance books in a way. And I think the experts are working on it. So those numbers also have a history. And when we throw out those numbers, we should also give the proper narrative. I think we've become too sensational in our media reportage, such that we lose the substance of the story.
I'd reference one particular case in point, that's GIF. And it would make me ask the question as to the level of involvement of SIGA when it comes to the day-to-day activities of these state-owned enterprises. Because if you look at the report, there are certain investments the state-owned enterprises made that were obvious that the profitability of these investments were not feasible, but in the end, we did. Investment into enterprises that we knew in the long run.
Enterprises like, we'll give an example.
Like, for instance, the SkyTrain was one of them. At the time, from the Auditor General's report, it's indicative that at the time we had even signed on, the company we were signing the agreement with did not even have the license for the technology. So then, I'm asking, if SIGA were involved in the processes.
SIGA was not involved then.
Okay, so that's
but now it
clarity I'm
won't
seeking.
happen. SIGA was not involved then. Now it won't happen, because if you bring such a proposal to us, you will have to convince us. We have the young, sharp people here who would quiz you, and it won't happen. We've had very, very important people come here, and they've battled under our questioning. And they come back and decide to walk away from a project. So as I told you, these organizations before were working as, you know, I'm put in charge of X company. Edward Boateng is running it. My board is subject to me, because the CEOs are very powerful.
Yeah.
So I decided I want to do this. It's my own dream. I do it. You know. And obviously, because there were no sanctions, even if there's a loss of money, you just walk away. That is going to change, and that is changing. So that's why I'm saying that with SIGA in the play now, we work very closely with the Ministry of Finance. We work very closely with our sector ministries to evaluate these projects. So you will not be seeing a lot of that example that you've given. I don't know too much about that, but you will not see it under this new dispensation.
All right, if you just join us, you're welcome to Fact Sheet Live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1, also live on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There's one important question which has to do with the level of compliance to your outfit when you demand documentation from these state-owned enterprises. How forthcoming are they?
It's getting better. But again, it's work in progress. These were things people were not doing. People were not even doing their own quarterly reports or monthly reports or weekly reports. So it's going to take time to change the mindset. But it's improving. I just gave you the example of the Controller and Accountant General. And I'd encourage you to go and talk to him. He's done a wonderful job. Because if you look at our national accounts now, we have 62 state entities that submitted their accounts. 2-3 years ago, only 5 did. So to move from there to now, if you look at the audited accounts, it's getting better. More and more organizations are submitting their audited accounts. They are submitting these accounts on time. Before, even when I came into this job 14 months ago, the organizations, they had not submitted accounts for the last 5 years. And you ask them, so how do you move from year to year? Because there was no accountability. So the accountability metrics is getting high, but it's not going to be done in a day. We all, media, SIGA, the entities, government, have to pull together to make sure that we get the right results that we're all looking for. Because at the end of the day, if our state entities don't work, our economy will not work. Because at the end of the day, they control over 60 to 70% of the infrastructure of this country. That infrastructure is what we have to, as they say in economics, make it sweat. So that sweating will then help private sector, help entrepreneurs, and help the entities themselves. And we haven't done a good job. But that is not through the fault of any one government or any one person. That is what it was. But now it's a different regime. And I think the president must be commended for putting this focus and making sure that this touch will be shown on the entities. And I believe, as I've told him severally, that the success of SIGA will be one of his lasting legacies to this country. Because, you know, how many roads can you build? How many schools can you build? How many hospitals can you build? But when systems are working, the impact is forever. You know, when systems are working, the impact is forever. So I've always said to him that, for instance, free SHS is a system. In 20 years' time, our level of illiteracy will be that much from what it is today. Then you begin to see the impact, because the thinking processes in this country will change. The understanding processes in this country will change. People's appreciation of issues will change. And that itself is a big contributor to our GDP. We always give examples of US. We give examples of UK. Because the people you meet there, even if they are cleaning the streets, they're educated. They understand the processes. They understand what to do. But here, when you meet somebody cleaning the streets, they have no knowledge. I remember when I was ambassador in China, it always used to amaze me that their flowers were cut so well and so linear. I mean, straight line. So I decided to look into it, and I realized that all these people wearing whatever by the roadside are all very well educated. That is their job.
Wow.
You know, so when you see it, you take it for granted. But you go to Ghana and ask somebody to do the same thing. You haven't given the person training, you haven't the person educated, so they do it anyhow. So I believe that the SIGA mandate, if it's well carried out, we'll see a big change in how our state entities perform in the coming years. And that's what we are trying to put in place, the framework, so that it will work.
Well, if you just join us, we'll be right back. And there's more to talk about. So stay with us. And welcome back to Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. Also live on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social media platforms. Our handle is ETV Ghana. So before the break, you talked about sanctions. I would like to know the sanctions regime per your act and what you've done with the sanctions within your act in terms of entities that are not complying or entities that are not meeting their KPIs.
Unfortunately, SIGA doesn't have the mandate to hire and fire CEOs. But we can recommend to the hiring authority that Edward Boateng is not capable. And recently, last year also, we published the list of all entities that were not complying with some of our requests.
Okay.
A lot of CEOs didn't like it. So this year has gotten better.
Okay.
I personally believe that we also need to look at some of our labor laws. People have to be fired. I do not understand when people go into the public service or the civil service in this country. It's a job for life, regardless of your level of contribution or productivity. And I'm hoping that we can also look at that and change it. I think it's something that we need to take up with the labor unions and also look at some of these things, because if we as a country also want to be productive, then there has to be a certain level of accountability. And I must say that in the public service and the civil service, the accountability level sometimes is a bit low. So you take the same person that is working for a government entity, you take that person into a private sector in Ghana, their level of productivity is ×2. You take that same person from the private sector in Ghana to a foreign-owned company in Ghana, their productivity is ×5. You take that person from that foreign same company and put them in the US, their productivity is ×10. We should ask ourselves, why? It's because with all these levels of changes I'm talking about, the sanctions are more severe. If you don't meet your mandate in the US, you are fired. In the UK, you are fired. In a foreign firm here, you are fired. But in our system, you just coast along.
Have you made any recommendations for any CEO to be fired?
As SIGA, under my tenure, not yet. But to be reprimanded, yes. To be talked to, yes. And as I told you, I published a list of entities that did not meet some of our mandates last year. That itself, it's name and shame. A lot of people didn't like it because we're also a society that likes to be thought of doing the right thing. Ghana is the only country where I always say that you go every 2, 3, 4 kilometers and there's a church or a mosque. And on Friday afternoon, everybody's running to the mosque. On Sunday, everybody is happy to go to the church. But from 1 p.m. on Sunday to 12 noon on Friday, we do almost the wrong thing. Most of us. So when you name and shame people, it touches them. That is what I've realized, and that's what we as SIGA have decided to use as their weapon now. Until the time comes that we have the right to fire. And then we'll just call you in and tell you that we asked you to do 1, 2, 3, 4. You didn't do it. So you are out.
It's interesting you use the word weapon because the story that was out there at the time when we were talking about the report that had come, one of the key sanctions that we were told you were going to implement was the fact that budgetary allocations for state-owned enterprises which had not met your targets or KPIs would not be allowed to go to them. Have you been able to achieve any of these?
Yes. That is being implemented in a very quiet way. So we call in the CEOs and we tell them we're holding your budget until you've met 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes they also need money for other projects. We hold back on it. So that is being done. And that is why we are seeing some of these changes. But also, some of the CEOs have serious and legitimate problems. Their budget is 2 million Ghana cedis. They are given 500,000. How do they achieve their mandate? So as much as we are pushing them, we also, the entities, SIGA, Ministry of Finance, Office of Government Machinery, we also have to release their resources to them on time. Because as we speak, some entities still do not have their budgets. So how do they meet their KPIs? So it's a very delicate situation, a very delicate balancing act. I cannot punish you if I have not given you the resources. But if I give you all the resources, then I have every right to hold you accountable. So these are the things that we have to look at. But I believe that right now, government in this country takes on too much. So let's make the SOEs efficient. Let's diverse the SOEs that government has no business being in that space, especially in this modern dispensation. So that we have enough resources to give to the people that have to do the work so that we can hold them 100% accountable. A lot of my CEOs do not have the resources to work, and a lot of them, or many of them, use their own personal resources. They drive their own cars, they fuel their own cars. Like I gave you the example at the beginning. This office is my own. The furniture I'm sitting on is my own. What if I didn't have my own resources? But you cannot establish SIGA and not give us SIGA the resources. So even with SIGA, we are handicapped in a way. We are handicapped in a way. And sometimes we have to go to the very institutions that we have to manage for assistance. So how does it work? Because if tomorrow CEO X is helping us and I sanction the guy, do you think if I go next time they will help us? They won't help. So SIGA itself is even hamstrung in a way. And those things have to change. And I think it's something that all of us have to look at and say, what are the critical institutions that we need in this country? And resource them very well.
Are you a friend of the CEOs and boards of these state-owned enterprises? Do they like you?
A lot.
They like you?
Yeah. Because they realize that I'm making them, or we at SIGA, make them efficient. I mean, recently I was in call. One of the CEOs said to me that, well, sometimes you can be annoying, but I like you because even with my own board, I'm beginning to realize that things are working better and I'm having an easier time. Everybody wants to do well. That's the truth. Everybody wants to do well. But at the same time, if we don't give people the resources, or if people don't know what to do, how can they do well? So that's the job. But if you are a SIGA CEO and you want to be loved by not doing the wrong thing, you're also failing yourself and failing the same entities. Yeah, so sometimes do we clash? Yes, we will clash. But after that, we go out and have a beer or have a Coke.
It's interesting you took me to where I wanted to take you to, a beer or a Coke. Because I'm wondering, a man with such enormous responsibility and tasks, what do you do on your regular day? Let me strip you of your title. What does Edward Boateng, what does he do?
First, I'm a family man. Okay. I think I have 3 daughters and a son. And my core responsibility is to make sure that my family is happy. That's one of the reasons when I came back as ambassador of China, I said to His Excellency that I wanted to stay here because as ambassador, my family did not come to China with me, and I felt after 4 years being away from them, I had to stay here. So family is important. I think my friends are important to me. I do a lot of exercising. One of the things that in the last 3-4 years I've been doing is also helping the disabled in Kumasi. And just this last Sunday, I was there with them. I think my passion for the disabled came from when I was in South Africa.
Okay.
And I remember when the South African Constitution makes it mandatory for organizations, both private and state, to employ disabled people. So for me, that was my first time working with disabled people. And I think, you know, I learned a lot, you know, because I remember my first time, one of, I think she was a quadriplegic, and said to me that you don't like me. And I said, why? He said, because every time you come in, you look at me. What is wrong with me? And I said to her, oh, really? Maybe I was showing compassion. But why should I show compassion?
Yeah.
Do I show compassion to you when I meet you? And he taught me a good lesson.
Yeah.
So when I see people on the streets, because they are crippled, they cannot work, it pains me. But even when I started my own company, Global Media, I remember I said we have to hire disabled people.
Yeah.
And we hired the first blind newsreader, Paul. I believe he's still with you.
He's still there.
And I remember the effort we went through. But later, people were very, very appreciative. And Paul, by being on air for the last 10 years, has also become a very, very good role model to a lot of blind people, to a lot of people who are disabled. And you know, physically challenged people, we can all be physically challenged one day.
Yeah.
Today we have our former president, President Kufuor, he's in a wheelchair. You know, you and I could be blind tomorrow. So I think that it's important that the Parliament of Ghana makes it mandatory that you come into a building like SIGA and it's not physically challenge friendly. Why? You know. So it's something that I have taken up. So every year I meet them, we talk. This year, for instance, we give them 40 what's it called? Wheelchairs. Yeah. Blind, the white canes, the crutches.
Okay.
I mean, these are my own resources. So every year you try and help about 200 or 300 of them. We've been doing it for the last 3-4 years.
Wow.
But it's something I want to take up. I want you guys to take up that the plight of the disabled in this country needs to be looked at. When we talk about the disabled in this country, we only talk about the ones we see. You know, the person is a cripple, the person is blind, the person is a quadriplegic. But you know, suicide rates are going up in this country. Nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
A lot of people are becoming bipolar. A lot of people are becoming depressive. All those are physical and mental challenges. And I think as a country, we need to take up these things because it can happen to anybody. Yesterday, I was here when one gentleman that's been servicing my air conditions for the last 20-something years said he wanted to see me. And I was shocked when he walked in with his son pulling. I said, Mr. What is wrong with you? He said, I can't see. I almost wept. I said, wow. This was a man who was so strong, agile, had his own business, but now he cannot see. You know, and that is something that can happen to me, can happen to you.
Yeah.
So that was one of my major pastimes. But I work out a lot and I run. I used to like reading a lot, but nowadays I don't have the time for it. So you can see me, that's me playing football there. I can show it.
What position did you play?
I'm a striker.
You're a striker?
Yeah. But late, because I'm getting old, I've gone to the defense.
Sir, we're grateful for the time this evening and for...
I think you have to show that picture of me striking.
We're grateful for your time and we're hoping for another beautiful engagement moving forward. Thank you so much,
Thank you very much.
And this has been Fact Sheet Live on ETV. We're hoping that next week, Tuesday, you'll be here with us as we bring you another interesting conversation with people who matter in society. Have a pleasant evening.